All set? Good evening, Wareham, and welcome to the joint meeting of the Select Board and the Bylaw Review Committee. I would like to call the Board of Select Board to order first, and then the Bylaw Review Committee will be called to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, present tonight, Ms. Corbett, Ms. Whiteside, myself, Jared Chadwick, and Ms. Quirk. Absent is Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Bowen and Mr. Bessie.
Thank you. I declare that there is a quorum present.
Good evening. I want to bring the Bylaw Review Committee to order. Could I have a roll call, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yes.
We have Julie Moran, and me, Jared Frederickson here.
Great. We have a quorum, so we may proceed.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
This is a hearing to have the Bylaw Review Committee discuss and explain the recommendations that they probably will be presenting to the special town meeting on April 28th. We do have copies of their recommendations here. They're all in draft form, and all of them are on file with the town clerk's office as they have been in draft form as of last week, or maybe even the week before, some of them. So I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Moran.
Thank you, Chair Whiteside. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Moran. I'm the chair of the Town Bylaw Review Committee. To my right is Jillian Morton, who is the clerk of our committee. To my left is Jared Frederickson, who is the vice chair of the committee. This evening, we would like to present to you, as the members of the Bylaw Review Committee, following up, which was constituted in fall of this past year, following up on the work done by prior members of the committee over the last year and a half. Our charge is really to review the town bylaws, which support the provisions of the charter, and also under Massachusetts law allows municipalities to establish laws that govern local matters, to provide administrative procedures, and to restrict or regulate certain activities, all of which must be approved at town meeting, and thereafter approved by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for compliance with state law. These bylaws do not stand alone. They are part of a larger body of town laws and regulations, including our zoning bylaws, Conservation Commission and Waterways regulations, Board of Health regulations, Select Board regulations, as well as Planning Board and other department rules and regulations. We want to also thank all those who in past years have worked on the bylaws, not just the last several years, but over time as changes have been made to our local laws, to the regulations. They've been incorporated into the bylaws. Our challenge and why we have accepted the charge of the Select Board and town officials is that over time, some of the provisions have become inconsistent, are governed by Massachusetts law, are obsolete, may be vague or confusing. These are some of the challenges that both the Select Board and town officials brought to our attention when they asked us to establish this committee and to undertake to review all of the bylaws in their entirety and to make recommendations, which we will proceed to go over for you this evening. The genesis, again, rose out of requests by various officials, but I think those of us who have looked at the laws, department heads who have tried to enforce them, and maybe have had a few challenges, have all asked us to please go through them one by one. We have met with town officials, department heads, to ensure that they are satisfied with either the existing or proposed amendments that we are making. So we feel confident that it reflects the will of department heads and citizens who have provided in the past comments on the existing rules and regulations and the bylaws. So some of the areas that we have identified, which we have worked on as part of this review, are sections and articles which have become obsolete over time, some of which have been identified by our department heads or have, as we've found, are inconsistent with Massachusetts law, or frankly, duplicate word by word the Massachusetts comparable statute. And in this case, we have found in many instances, we are recommending that those sections be deleted because they are referenced in Massachusetts law. We've also looked at, over time, there are some practices that are no longer followed, whether because they are inconsistent, obsolete, or just no longer practiced by the department head charged with their responsibility relative to the bylaw. We also found that there are a lot of duplicate clauses within the bylaws. Severability clauses is a good example. So we've tried in our review to identify duplicate clauses and consolidate those clauses into one. We also found that there were, over time, some of the articles were misnumbered, they were out of sequence. There were instances where a section that might have talked about all the different committees and commissions in the town was sprinkled all throughout the bylaws. So one of the things that we did in our work was to try to consolidate those like groups of bylaws so they would make more sense to the reader and to the our town officials charged with monitoring or enforcing them. We also looked at what the bylaws might be missing. As we said, times have changed. There are some articles that we felt were important to include. We also did a search of previous town meeting actions and found there were quite a few articles which, although approved by the town, made sense to now incorporate into the bylaws. The outcome of this project, however, remains a work in progress. We are working forward as we find new areas where the bylaws might need to be amended. We are looking at, and we expect potentially at the fall town meeting to capture any other enforcement provisions that we feel might be necessary. So stay tuned for that, I guess is what we would want to say. So once we completed the edits, we then did a final review, which is the red line that you see was posted with the town clerk, to make sure that the articles were clear, concise, definitions were inserted where they were appropriate, and that overall there was a clear organization of the articles. So that was really the process that we undertook. And this evening, we're going to start with Jillian, who's going to talk about the deletions, which are, again, were filed with the town clerk with the explanations of why there were certain articles that we chose to delete. Sure. Yes. At the end of Jillian and each presentation will take questions. So, Jillian,
All right.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Julie, and just to, nope. Thank you, Julie, and I just commend you too for the amount of work and undertaking. You know, it's a lot of document. We're both attorneys, but it's a lot of document. In my presentation, so I'm talking about deletions, and I would love to just start with a section just so the public and the select board can understand what we're dealing with. You know, a Section 8 of our bylaws, there was a bylaw that no person shall fly a kite or throw stones, sticks, or other missiles, or willfully frighten a horse, or kick at a football, or play at a game in which a ball is used, or shoot with or use a bow and arrow, blowgun, sling, air gun, spring gun, or other implements to propel missiles in any street. You know, these are things that clearly have been identified and are antiquated. So I didn't think it was prudent to go through every one of those deletions and bore you with that, but what I have done is kind of categorized the different deletions into 6 different categories to kind of give you a basis of what those categories are. Julie touched on a few of them. I won't go into the clerical things, you know, us changing the numbering and things like that. That's to actually make it more user-friendly for people to read. But let's go through the 6 that I've found. So, a summary of deletions. The first one's governance and administration, meaning that things like if a bylaw is already within our charter, that's not something necessarily we need within this bylaw. So, for example, a requirement for the town accountant to maintain insurance records. That's already an administrative duty per the charter, excuse me. Or prohibiting a selectman to hold multiple offices, already covered in our town charter. So that's something where, again, we want to just make this concise. We are really trying to trim down the unnecessary duplicate information. So that's the governance and administration section. Second one, historical and obsolete provisions, exactly what I was just talking about. I mean, you could go through, there's things that clearly in our lovely town of Wareham were very important to stick in there, but now there's other things that are covered within the laws. And so things like that are historically just not necessary. I mean, there was even a section regarding having animals on leashes and things like that. You can have cats and dogs, but you can't have cows and sheep and horses and things like that. So this is more of not to make fun of our bylaw. It's just to have the public, why are we doing this? Why are we spending energy? It's to make sure that we're getting up to snuff with our bylaws and keeping them, historically relevant. The third one's public safety and order. So things like the firearm discharge and disorderly conduct rules that are currently within our bylaw are already addressed within MGL, the Mass General laws, okay? Things like parking rules for handicap spaces. We'd never want to be in a position that we're having conflicting laws. If there's a state law, something like that with handicap spaces, that's going to be covered within the state law. Fourth is infrastructure and public works. So this, for example, this was something like house numbering and street naming. That's not something no longer followed, and it's actually, we have a more modern process for that, usually in conjunction with the assessors and the fire departments. Stormwater management, another one being obviously the other boards in town, and there are different laws there. So those infrastructure and public works. Fifth one, a big one, was waterways and environmental regulations. There's many other boards, and not only here in Wareham, but obviously in the state. We were able to work with the harbor master closely as well. So making sure, especially with our town being one of the biggest shorelines, it's very important that was updated. Restrictions on boatyard operations and mooring specifications, that's covered in, you'll see the deletions that we did in the updated regulations. And just the last one, the law enforcement and penalties. So I know during this process and even prior to my involvement, there was discussions with all the different departments. So we're talking fire department, the police, to figure out what things are in this charter that are, not necessary, right? We're like paid police details for frequent disturbances of properties. That's not something that the police department does. So we never want to have something within the bylaw that's not following actually the procedure of the department. And then some non-criminal violation fines, that's going to be regulated. And you'll see in the old bylaws, there were some fees that now we're finding a more efficient process to be able to go through and have it set in different ways by the select board. So that's, in essence, what we did. Happy to answer any all questions if there's anyone in the public or the board has any questions on specific ones. I know it's a lot of information, but that's essentially the gist of it. I know also we did run this by Attorney Bowen. I believe he gave the okay on everything. So, making sure, again, that the statutes are up to date, nothing's been appealed or anything like that. And so we really tried to do our homework here.
One other thing I just wanted to add, the Department of Natural Resources did allow us to remove, it's about almost 20 pages of the bylaw, and to insert a link. Coming attractions, the Department of Natural Resources also tells us that they are in the process, probably next, I won't say when, but shortly, in the near future, near term, they expect to amend the animal control law. So what we did is we did modify it for consistency, sequencing, definitions, but did not do anything around the substance of the animal control law. Similarly, with Conservation Commission, I know our agent Josh Faraday is working on amending the Conservation Commission rules, regulations, so we have left those basically untouched, other than kind of the sequencing that we talked about. So just so everyone's aware, that's where we are on those.
Any of my board members have any questions? I just have one question. You read your deletions in sections. Is that how you're presenting them to the public? I know.
Nope, the public, it's quite long. The amount of, just so if the public wants to hear, there's a section, there's actually the individual explanation, okay? So, for example, when I was talking about that first one that I wrote, right, it's going to say an explanation, this is obsolete. So each section actually references the updated maybe MGL or policy. So if anyone heard anything that they really want to go check, you're more than welcome to go through and find that individual explanation.
Thank you.
Okay, Jared Frederickson is now going to talk about the additions that we made to the zoning bylaws.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Zoning, sorry, excuse me. The town bylaws.
Right. So thank you. And yeah, so like Julie said, I'll be going through the additions that we're going to be recommending here for the town bylaws. There's a total of there's not that many, there's about 12, so I figure we'll just go through them each one by one. Shouldn't take too long here for us. So first things first, we're adding a definitions section is what we're recommending. Currently, throughout the town bylaws, there are definitions within bylaws for specific terms. This way, it's all consolidated in one place. So terms like general laws, multi-member body, charter, pretty basic terms that appear throughout the bylaws are all defined in one place. That'll make it easier for people to find certain terms. They can all find it all in one place. The second thing we're recommending is we're adding Division 1, Article 2, adding to Section 2 of that, rather. This one here, also pretty straightforward. It just clarifies the warrant process for town meeting warrant. Again, not too much to it. It's not changing anything. It's just clarifying the process as it exists now. The third is right here, description of meeting requirements. It just lays out the rules for record keeping, open meeting law, and procedure that apply to the meetings for any and all town boards that we have now. Again, this is things that we already follow by, but it's clarifying those rules that we already have. Number 4 is a pretty specific one. We're dealing with Division 1, Article 3, Section 4B. It's pretty specific. It has to do with a specific type of hearing, adjudicatory hearings, and the rules surrounding the ability of a member to vote in a meeting in which they are not present. But in short, it's just bringing us into compliance and explaining how to comply with Chapter 39, Section 23D of the Mass General Laws. So that's just getting us in it's explaining Mass General Laws in short. Next up, number 5, Division 3, Article 1, Sections 2 through 5. This has to do with the house numbering, which I believe belongs to primarily to the assessors now. This is just inserting something that has already been approved at town meeting back in 2018. Next up, number 6. This explains the basics of the Wareham Redevelopment Authority, the composition, terms, and responsibility, or rather the composition, the terms and the responsibilities of the Wareham Redevelopment Authority as it exists now. So it says how many members, how they're appointed, and what they're empowered to do. Let's see. All right, number 7. This has to do with the penalties for violations of specific bylaws. It establishes that penalties shall be set by the relevant boards, so things pertaining to Board of Health, penalties will be set by the Board of Health, or if it pertains to zoning, then it'll be handled by the Building Department, and so on. And it also clarifies the effects of continuous violations, and this is in place of what we had previously, where there was kind of a hodgepodge of different explanations for fines and things throughout the bylaws. This makes it more straightforward and just lays out one, here's who's going to be setting the penalties for what. Number 8. All right, this is the nip ban that we approved at town meeting a couple years ago. It's not in the town bylaws yet. We're putting it in there now and recommending. That's not much to that one either. Number 9. Wait, hang on. Yeah, number 9, we are looking at a severability clause. Currently in the bylaws, we have severability clauses located throughout within specific articles. This one allows us to remove those from the specific articles, and instead we have one severability clause that just establishes that one or any bylaw is not necessary, or sentence or article is not necessarily attached to the other. So if one is invalid, then it doesn't apply to everything else in the bylaws. Let's see. Next up, actually the next 2 are both very similar, and these establish composition and terms of office for the Wareham Library Board of Trustees and the Board of Health, respectively. Again, not changing anything, it's just actually putting into the bylaws the compositions and the responsibilities of these boards as they exist currently. And last one, it just clarifies the composition, power, and authority of the, or I'm reading the wrong thing. Last one has to do with the annual town report. So it's just getting us in accordance with Chapter 40, Section 49 of the general laws. It just lays out the procedure and preparation process for annual town reports. I think that's all I have for additions here, but I can take any questions if anybody in the public or anybody up here has anything. Great, well, I'll turn it back over to, oh, yeah.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
just one here, Division 3.
Oh.
Nope. Yeah, just Division 3, Article 1, Section 2 through 5, mainly Section 5. The penalty for failure of an owner of the building to comply with the town bylaws shall be a fine of $20 and may be enforced by non-criminal disposition by a police officer or director of inspectional services. My only thing with that is I wish we could add by EMS, because EMS is the one that's going to the houses left and right. I know Judith is shaking her head over there, but when I worked for Wareham EMS, trying to find a house with missing numbers was quite often, and I can tell you, not for a guarantee, but I can tell you EMS is at these houses a heck of a lot more than inspectional services. I can't clarify more than police, but if not, pretty even.
What I would say to that is that EMS would bring that mistake or omission to the appropriate board, whether it be the Board of Health or whether it be the building inspector, because there are certain boards who do have that ability to enforce the laws, and the EMS would not be one of them. I hear your...
Yes,
yeah.
I know.
Okay, so I think that's good.
That's why I said I wish.
Yep, okay.
they were the right, but-
Ms. Quirk? No?
My only question is whether,
Do you have your mic on? Sorry.
whether this has made you more eager or less eager to go to law school.
Good question. I would say, if anything, more, but, you know.
Good.
And I just have a couple of, one question and one comment, I guess. Even though it might not have been in the document known as the bylaws, the bylaw about the NIPS is in fact a bylaw and was accepted by the Attorney General.
Yes.
So those things,
Yes.
what you're doing is cleaning up some of the omissions, even though they in fact, okay.
We're past a
Yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah.
They're there, but it's just not formally.
Right, and then the other question I have is, you were talking about the fines, and did you change it so that the language would be something like, as may be set from time to time by the, yeah, okay, thank you.
And published on the town website.
Yes,
Yep.
okay, great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do have one other question, which is, in the last go-around when we worked on these issues, there was a provision that we were proposing that would enable the clerk to make changes in order to make the document read more coherently. Is that going to go forward this time?
Not this time, but we've considered it. So, I think the last document, before I get to earth removal, which will kind of end our meeting, there is a red line document of the bylaws. We thought it was easier to explain by way of deletions and additions than the redlining, which would probably give any one of us, including our citizens, a headache. But it exists, and basically it covers many of the things that I talked about before. It's clarification. It is making sure defined terms are used appropriately. So really everything that we produced is in the redlining, but it really does reflect feedback from our department heads, areas of awkwardness in grammar, misspelling, inaccuracies in sequencing, inaccuracies in numbering of sections. So there is some changes that were made, again, based on discussions with department heads, removing this word and that word, but it is, and moving everything around. So that's why the redlining may give everyone a bit of a headache when you're moving sections, but we thought it was important to make sure that the citizens knew where we started and where we ended up. So we will be producing an amended and restated, if you will, as part of this process, which I think will be easier for folks to understand and look and review.
The other thing I would add to that, Ms. Moran, is that when the Charter Review Committee redid the charter, it was a massive look at. The Attorney General and the state required us to have the red line version, which we had. And we were able to really smooth the process out to demonstrate what had in fact been done, what had been added, what had been deleted, and it saved an enormous amount of going back and forth.
Right.
Thank you.
And we plan to do that as well. Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone who's looked in? Yes.
You guys have made it seem really easy and simple and straightforward. And I just have to say,
Presentation is deceiving.
having been involved in this somewhat, what you're seeing is like literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of legal work and other work that frankly the town could not afford. And you all have stepped forward and done this, and I think the town is and will be truly grateful for all of the effort and the diligence that you've shown. So thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you to my fellow committee members for their hard work. Thank you. So the last bylaw we would like to discuss separately is the earth removal bylaw. There is an existing bylaw that you will see in the materials in the red line, which has not been changed. And that is because we are bringing forward an article that is going to present the existing, the deletion, the article is requesting the deletion of the existing earth removal bylaw and the substitution of the bylaw that is being presented. So if I could, we do have copies. Certainly they are at the town clerk's office for anyone who would like to review it. I'd like to just make some points, if I could, about the earth removal bylaw. The earth removal bylaw is, I won't say it's vintage, but it's been around a while. There's quite a bit of ambiguity, lack of precision in what we know citizens believe is an area that they feel very strongly about, understanding how it operates, who's authorized to do the work, how does the permitting process work. So we, as part of the process, we began by doing a bit of a search as to what bylaws were out there with communities similar to us who may have agricultural activities which become associated with earth removal. So we looked at bylaws, and we thought that our conclusion was that the bylaw produced by the town of Carver did have some provisions that we felt would be helpful to our work. So we reviewed the Carver bylaw. We created a series of drafts. We consulted with a member of the Cranberry Growers Association because we know for the cranberry industry, this bylaw is of a keen interest. So we wanted to make sure that we were speaking at least and consulting with a member of that community, a representative of that community. So what it really does, and let's talk about what we felt was important, to refine the provisions of earth removal, to strengthen oversight of permitted earth removal activities, because we know there has been a tremendous amount of controversy within some parts of the community, some more than others. We wanted to capture key concepts from the Carver bylaw to create a concise and uniform bylaw that would make it easier, if you will, for the permit granting authority, which is the select board, who I'm looking at, to enforce it, to monitor it, to regulate the work that is being done relative to earth removal. And one of the things that we started with is created a set of definitions, defining what is earth removal, what is restoration? What does that mean? So we really tried to create a series of concise definitions, work in progress always, that would be helpful to both an applicant, the community, and the select board. So that is, the current proposed bylaw does have a series of definitions. And we really wanted to make sure that what we were permitting, we understood exactly what activities we were permitting, where they were going to be undertaken, what the effect might be, including damage to streets, any type of overflow from these that might impact the community. And so we looked at all of those as part of our discussion. And we wanted to make sure that the select board was empowered not only to look at the bylaw, to create rules and regulations around the permitting process. So we were very clear in the right of the select board to create rules and regulations relative to the permitting of earth removal. We looked at instituting, and which we undertook in the bylaws, a more comprehensive application procedure. What is being done, where, how long might it be undertaken, what is the goal, and then looking at the site plan along with other documents that we would ask be submitted. And so it takes the language in our existing bylaw and strengthens it. And it asks for more information. It also acknowledges that the town does not have all of the experience and knowledge that they might like relative to earth removal. So what it calls upon is the use of what's known as Mass General Laws 53G accounts, as we know them, to allow the town to hire experts to review the application, monitor the process, ensure that what is permitted occurs, what is not permitted does not occur, and really a way for the town to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the community is that there are steps being taken to help ensure the health, safety, and welfare. We're not saying that that this is the end-all be-all, but it's a step forward in that process. We also looked at revisit the calculation of fees which would be set by the select board from time to time for earth removal. We looked to clarify to some degree the agricultural exemption under the earth removal regulations. We looked for reporting and monitoring of activities. What might that look like? And we did treat that a bit. We looked at permitting timelines. 1 year, created some new performance, let's call them, I won't say standards, but some performance reflections to make when someone comes forward to seek a renewal of their permit. So we put in some reflections that the select board could use around the applicant who is before you. We looked at abandonment after 12 months of no activity. We have provided that the permit is deemed abandoned and therefore is no longer in full force and effect. We looked at an important aspect for our applicants. We have an existing bylaw. We are now looking at amending. So how does that impact existing permits? How does it impact someone who has undertaken the activity without permit, maybe not realizing a permit was needed? So we treated that as well in the bylaw. And then again, we looked at enforcement penalties, restoration of improperly permitted or unpermitted, or maybe earth removal that was not in complete compliance with permits. How might we handle that? So we created some clarification of cease and desist, notice of violations, criminal and non-criminal disposition. So a body of the bylaw around enforcement. And I know there are others that helped us in consulting on this, so I would welcome any other comments by those who have reviewed the bylaw, have some questions. Anyone from the select board who'd like to add anything?
I would add just one thing, which is that the Carver bylaw, which we used as a model, does assess fees for certain incidental agricultural activities, which this town has not historically. What Carver does is to place those fees into a fund for road maintenance. And so this is something I think as we move along, we may want to work with Mr. Sullivan to see whether Wareham wants to do something similar.
Questions from the board or anyone from the audience? Yeah. Yes.
Hello, this is Jim Manise, and I did have an opportunity to review the bylaw as written and also the new proposed bylaws. I find there's a disconnect between the permitting process for projects and ensuring that the select board has approved or disapproved the actual earth removal. And I found that it's often not enforced. So how do we address those? And I would have to agree with Selectman Quirk's last statement about incidental earth movement or removal. Is it on-site, off-site? How much is it? What are we going to do? I did see that you increased the amount that developers can do, and also, I think you went up to it was 5 cubic yards, and you've increased that, which may be the proper thing to do. But again, it's the enforcement and the disconnect between planning board or zoning board approvals and making sure the paperwork is processed through the select board. I found that permits are issued for projects which should have been reviewed and probably under the old bylaw, not allowed until the approval from the select board was done. That's a missing link in enforcement and how to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muniz.
Yeah, that's, yeah. Just so that the public knows, we do get quarterly reports from the companies that have earth removal permits. I believe a couple of years ago, Mr. Sullivan created a $50,000 fund to hire an expert on looking at. I'm guessing that money is still available.
We voted to bring that back 6 months ago, if not more, and it was put out.
Yeah, we
for
put it
bid
out, and nobody took the bid.
Nobody.
But the money is there, so your 52, whatever it was.
53G.
53G,
Yeah.
okay.
So
That may be available.
just
And-
be aware that 53G, I should have clarified, comes from the applicant.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but I believe, I'm not sure how that wording was, but we could look at that.
Sure.
And then the other thing, and I'm sorry I wasn't listening quite carefully enough. So Company A comes before the Planning Board or the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they are going to be moving a quantity of earth off the property. Does that board then notify the Select Board, which has to give permission and have a public hearing? Or has the public hearing been held because it was held in front of either the ZBA or the Planning Board?
One example might be, which is treated a bit in here, is a subdivision. And it seems to me that would, the subdivision, planning board, but the earth removal associated with the subdivision would come before the select board. That's a separate permit to my mind. I don't know how you
So,
feel.
yeah, I mean, I know there's an example on Minot Avenue where there were either 3 or 4 houses put in, and there was the removal of an entire hill. And there were several questions, including some by one of the previous speakers, as to how that was allowed. And so my question comes back to, in what you have created, would that be addressed?
I think that's a good point, and I think it should be addressed more clearly.
I
Okay.
do think that there's enforcement. I mean, the
The end.
building commissioner, the zoning enforcement officer, as far as those permits, it should be one of the boxes that's checked off by Mr. Turner, that you have an earth removal permit, as well as ZBA approval or planning
Subdivision.
board approval before anything happens. I mean, everyone, that to be checked off before any dirt is moved.
Right, but I guess, so there are 2 questions that I'm asking.
Yeah.
One is, how does that get communicated? But second of all, does there have to be a second hearing, or does the hearing in front of the permitting board have to? In other words, how many shots do the neighbors get at it, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I think the planning board would deal with the actual subdivision. The question would be, and what we should be looking at is, what does the application ask? And if it should say, please describe any earth removal activities. And that would trigger, in my opinion, a permit by the select board, in front of the select board. So you could suspend, you could continue the hearing, awaiting the action by the select board on the earth removal permit. Just,
We need to make sure that this is
yeah, clear,
laid out.
yeah.
I would, I would just lay out one other thing. Mr. Muniz, you asked about, or I think you were alluding to the fact that there may be earth removal activity going on that is incidental to agricultural use that is not permitted currently. And I think one of the efforts we're undertaking here is to bring that incidental activity under the permitting authority of the select board. Because I've read our current provision and find it not to be a model of clarity in this regard, and I think may have been read by people whose activities might come under it as not applying to what they were intending to do. So we're trying to rectify that.
Right. Okay, anyone else? Sure, of course. Mr. Muniz?
You're on mute, Jim?
I'm good now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought I was able to speak before, but I guess not. Thank you for the discussion and consideration. And again, enforcement is important. There's ongoing earth removal presently, and it has been for considerable period of time. No action's been taken. And, you know, it's lost revenue. You know, it's a quarter a yard. If someone moves 50,000 yards, a considerable amount of money. So again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks very much, Mr. Muniz.
Are there any other individuals who have questions or raise their hand? Mr. Day? No, okay.
Okay.
So what I would say from the Select Board's perspective is that the documents have been on file and are on file in the town clerk's office. These articles would not be heard until a special town meeting, which is on April 28th, and it will be held at 7:30. The warrant for that meeting has not closed. We closed the annual town meeting today, which gives you some time to do some renovation or tweaking or whatever, and that certainly you hope to hear from the public. And I would echo the thanks, having worked on the charter. Red line versions are the things that nightmares are made out of, really. But I really appreciate the work that you and everyone that you conferred with on this. So I have no other business for this meeting. Do you have any other?
No, just thank you to our chairwoman over here, who's,
No.
you know,
It was
not retired
It was a
yet,
team
right?
effort, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite an
Almost
undertaking.
pushed me out of retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we need a motion to adjourn both meetings, or each meeting, or unless you want to.
You want to start? Or, I think we need to go first.
Yeah.
You can go first.
Yes. Could I have a motion to, at
No, 7:46.
7:46,
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
I moved, all in favor?
Aye.
Julie Moran, aye.
Jillian Morton. I said Julie Moran. Aye.
Thank you.
It's close.
Meeting is adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn and seconded is not debatable. I will go for a roll call vote. Ms. Corbett?
Aye.
Ms. Quirk?
Aye.
Ms. Chadwick?
Yes.
Myself, yes, it is so. We are adjourned. Thank you very much to the public. Good evening, Wareham.